I'm Tim Ventura, and we're joined today by Dr. Eamonn Ansbro, Director and Research Astronomer at Kingsland Observatory in Ireland. Dr. Ansbro has a Master's in Astronomy from the University of Western Sydney and a Master's in Philosophy and PhD in Astronomy from the Planetary Space Science Research Institute at the Open University. He's a member of a number of prominent UFO and UAP organizations, including the Scientific Coalition for UAP Studies, SETI, the International Aeronautical Federation, and the Royal Astronomical Society. So Eamonn, welcome, sir. It is a pleasure and an honor to have you with me today. We are discussing new data for UAP techno-signatures that suggest organized orbital tracks that UAP may be using to monitor the Earth. You have a presentation for us, so let me hand things right over to you to get started.
Okay. The title of this presentation is Possible Techno-signatures Around the Earth. Now, this was actually presented to the American Geophysical Union, the Planetary Sciences, there in December, just 2 months ago. And it has some reaction. It seems to have lost itself somewhere, but we feel it's an important paper. It was rather surprised by other scientists that I know that I actually got this paper through and peer-reviewed because it's, still a controversial area, I suppose, with some scientists. But anyway, we were successful in getting it through. So just starting off, I want to present just a background on the instrumentation side of things that to do with UAP research, and then leading into the actual analysis of this work. So here we go. So this is the background to the instrumented UAP research that's been going on for the last 24 years, I think, altogether. And the whole idea actually was to find out what information we could get from UFOs. Now, the thing is, in this particular case, this was intentionally relocated to an area in Ireland which has a high frequency of UFOs at the time. So instrumentation was designed specifically for detecting UFOs and hopefully detecting some data from it, so we can apply some physics to the whole thing. So, so anyway, this is the area in question, Lough Key, County Roscommon, in the northwest of Ireland. That's, obviously this is the northwest of Europe. And this gives this little bit more detail where we are located. Okay, Lough Key, this is where all this activity appears. This is just a sample of some of the cases of some of the UFOs turning up, which I'll go into later on, but I'll actually be showing video footage and images and that, which we've analyzed in recent years. That's me with some of the instrumentation analysis that we do here at Kingsland Observatory. One of the big problems with UFOs is the extreme light source that appears. It's really difficult to know what type of filtering to use when such an occurrence happens. This is the instrumentation. It's made up of 11 cameras altogether. It's an all-sky system, and it segments the sky into different regions, and then we use a multiplexer in order to see if we can detect any UFOs. Now, we have to discriminate between many other objects as well, but when you do that, we do actually end up with some UFOs. They're quite rare, mind you. This is some of the other tracking platforms. These are optical and infrared. We've actually used gamma rays as well. We haven't been that successful now to do with gamma rays. It seems that UFOs need to be a lot more close up to determine gamma ray radiation. So here's one of the early recordings we got, not necessarily with this instrumentation, but this was based on a theory that I had a long time ago that an event may occur at a specific location at a specific time. This is why this was an attraction of actually relocating to Lough Key in Ireland. Um, this has been shown. It's been shown on national television here way back, over 25 years ago. Um, then there's some really good cases to do with the cylindrical type of craft or construct. We've had multiple witnesses seeing this type of construct. Very similar to one of the old ones in, I think, California in Cisco Hills case, 1972. Um, but those are not necessarily lights being emitted from there. We think actually they're anode and cathode type emissions with a very powerful type of power system behind it. Um, so this is based on a theory. It's a fair I've been working on. I had presented about 23 years ago, which was caused quite a stir, you can imagine. But we've actually upgraded the theory a lot more. Um, so this is another construct we discovered back in August 2000. This is also near Lough Key, a small town near called Boyle, which is only 2 or 3 miles from Lough Key, and we detected a triangular type of construct with a beam coming out of it. But the beam wasn't noticed until the frames were actually analysed. What is quite common are orbs. They come in globular type of construct. This was rather flat when we analysed it photometrically. We've seen, I've recorded double orbs moving around, which is quite interesting, that they would actually move along parallel with each other. We've done analysis on this type of thing. It's very similar to in Project Hestelin in Norway, which I have worked with other scientists there. And actually, I was only out there just 3 months ago doing field work with some of the scientists that were there. Another unusual type of construct was type-shaped UFO. And there's all the data on it there. And again, we got a profile on it. You never know what to expect. It certainly wasn't a balloon. We've determined that. But it's just to give you a flavor of some of the stuff that we've been doing over the years. But this leads into my favorite area, which is dealing with patterns and cycles of UFOs. And I'm sort of convinced now there is a pattern to it. We can actually show the results that's within this presentation, which was shown to the HEU there in December last. So we've based actually the observations on different databases. Particularly the NUFORC database, which has 80,000 reports, and also the Hatch database, which is a global database. And the data we got are from 1940 right up to 2024. And so we extracted also some of the best cases where there was a minimum of about 10 minutes duration for the UFO to be recorded. And also, in addition, in some of the much later dates, certainly from, say, around the 1980s onwards, we have got some thermal imaging recordings. And also, these would have to be multiply witnessed as well. And of course, radar is a really key element in all this. So we've also got radar data as well. We've got a lot of this stuff through other papers. There's only so much is provided in these databases. So you have to do an enormous amount of work on some of the best cases. And you will actually find through others that have been working in the field that they had followed up on, say, for example, with radar. Uh, so, for example, the New York, what's in here, a spot that shows a clustering of 37 events. This is 37 UFOs appearing at specific location, but it's spread over a period of 1 hour and 39 minutes. And this is back in 4 years ago. So this is the type of thing that we've actually looked at, not just in the northeast of the United States, but also globally as well. So we've used uh, density-based spatial clustering, DB-scan, which is commonly used actually by researchers for this kind of work. And then, because we're trying to find, the orbital periods, inclinations within the pattern itself, we've obviously had to take consideration in the databases the reliability and performance that we can um, determine, from that reliability. And I'll just give you, I won't go into this in any detail, but it's just to give everybody a flavor about this. Um, so, so this is the characteristics. These are just some examples here to do with the velocities, the altitude, and all these are referenced, and a description as well. I've also been interested in fast walkers. These would be ones that are outside the Earth, and but they're quite rare to find data on that. But we did find some um, over the throughout the well, separate actually from the databases, mind you. Um, um, so we would extract, for example, each one going back to 1940 and take the best cases altogether. And then the reliability would have to be a minimum of, it had to be multiply witnessed, not one person, and also a minimum of 10 minutes filming and also radar as well. Obviously, some cases was just filmed, but no multiply witness to it. From that, we determined the performance, which would be it's quite interesting. Anti-gravity is quite a significant one here, and hypersonics as well, and to some degree cloaking, cloaking not just in the air but also underwater as well. Um, so in the analysis we used Python code. When I say we, I work with another a physicist, Eric Rowe, who's Norwegian, and we've been working together now for about, I think, well over a year now altogether. We actually met up there just in September because there was so much field work, but there was a conference in Hessdalen in Norway, which is a very well-known place for UFO activity. So in the analysis, using importing and pre-processing Norfolk and Hatch databases, there was an enormous amount of data we had to delete. We had to have reliable data for this in order to explore, analyze, and time correlations, determining orbital parameters. And then trajectory modeling would be another one as well. So this is the distribution of the orbital periods that we've worked out. And it seems to be averaging between 65 to 67 minutes. This is quite interesting because back in the late 90s, when I was working on this with another aerospace engineer, we were actually coming up with the same result, and that was with the minimum of data. It was 65 minutes, and that was on a global level, and that's based on, close encounters of the first kind all the way to the fourth kind. But we're actually still getting, I mean, either it's a coincidence or we're on track that, that this is the orbital period that the UFOs are using around the Earth. So then on the orbital inclinations, even back 25 years ago, we had much higher orbital inclinations, right up to 53 degrees. So because we were thinking that the craft or constructs were um, coming to the Earth, but at particular inclinations within the solar system, and uh, and the average seemed to be around 53 degrees, but we're actually getting different um, inclinations in this. And I suspect actually that the data that we had before was rather weak, and this is much better because of the enormous amount of data that we were provided with as compared to what was it, about 15,000 reports going back to the 1880s. This is back now in the 1990s, and only selecting 1,300 uh, reliable reports, that is. So really, in the theory that we had at the time was that we only had 2 points on the track, which is very weak. So I always felt that we really have to review this again. So this is the latest results we're getting. That we think that the UFOs are techno-signatures. There's a definite intelligence behind this, and it seems to have a programmed monitoring going on. But as I said, it's still a theory at this stage. We still need to explore further, specifically to do with inclinations. This is the DB scan cluster view of UAPs for both the Hatch and New Fork. And it's amazing that it's showing up globally, the same results as it would, say, in the United States. So this is just a diagram, what we think may be the orbital period. The average we take is 66 minutes. I mean, you could lower it to 65, but you know, it still needs to be worked on. But we're set on the 66 minutes now, and the inclination seems to be 0 to 18 degrees. But there's a lot more work to do using Fourier analysis, which we could actually fine tune the inclinations um, much better. Um, so yeah, this is the result. So we're saying that, and this was actually, as I said, presented at the American Geophysical Union meeting dealing with planetary sciences, and in particular, there was a section dealing with technosignatures in the solar system or with exoplanets, but in our case, for dealing with technosignatures around the Earth, and we're using the UAP as the means of finding out, are they technosignatures? I'm convinced they are technosignatures now, and that they have an orbital period of 66 or 67 minutes. Inclinations between 0 and 18 degrees, that would have to be looked at closer. It could be still in that region, but we don't know yet. As I said, this is a work in progress at the moment. So that's it, actually, in a nutshell. So
Well, Eamon, thank you so much. This is a tremendous presentation. Let's break this down for the audience. Your analysis of UAP data strongly suggests that the Earth is under coordinated, controlled surveillance from space, right?
yes.
Okay. So,
Now, when we say space, Tim, I know there's been new trending discoveries going on, with the consensus is saying that, look, they're from here. Well, that's fair enough, but they can still do a monitoring around the Earth. They might have been originally from somewhere in space, but they seem to be residing here. So
yeah. Well, and you worked with the New Fork database as well, and that is a massive database of sightings. So this isn't just like a few discrete examples, right? You're working with tens of thousands of reports and trying to correlate the position and turn that into effectively flight paths, right?
yes. So we're suggesting the UAP are technosignatures having orbital periods with rotational period around the Earth of an average of 65 minutes, with a standard deviation of 38 minutes. That's from the New Fork database. All right. So similar results show an orbital period around the Earth an average of 67 minutes, with a standard deviation of 42 minutes.
You're saying that if the orbital period for these things is just over an hour, maybe we could predict where sightings will happen.
Um, well, I wouldn't use the word predict. Sorry, I'm not being direct with you. I would use windows of opportunity when events may occur. They may not.
Okay.
There's no guarantee because it really depends on how much data that we have. But the one thing I don't know, are they prograde or retrograde? The actual, orbits. Um, but going back to your point, I know what you're getting at, could we find a location on the Earth where the event actually occurs? That's what we're still working on. That's more comprehensive. I had worked on this before, a long time ago, but it seems to have it's been problematic. I mean, it appears to work, and then it doesn't work in other areas. It's like, oh, yeah, it can be frustrating, this whole thing. But I think now, as I mentioned earlier on, that we have a lot more databases. We never had anything like this
Yeah.
until now, you know. Um, so, so what was your next question?
Well, there are a lot of aspects of this that are really interesting, right? And so some of the things that came to mind are like, okay, humans use aircraft for wildlife management. We use them to track herds, review environmental conditions and potential damage, increase or decrease in population size. We do scientific methods or scientific types of analysis on animal populations using controlled surveillance, just like you're describing. But one of the things I'd wondered was, um, is this benign like that, or is this surveillance that might be building up to something negative, right? Because we also use surveillance for all sorts of military applications, gauging troop strengths and positioning and things like that. So, it could be completely benign in terms of UAP just want to see how the world is developing, or it could be nefarious in nature. Was there anything in your studies that might help you guess at intent?
Well, I've really gone on the scientific side of this one because I said it does fit the zoo hypothesis. That's the monitoring of the Earth. And also an expansion of that would be the laboratory hypothesis, where they're actually doing tests on locations on the Earth. And I don't mean just human being interaction, but also, um, I was just thinking of the nuclear silos, as another possibility, but which of course, shows correlation of intent there. So um, I, if you want to speculate, I suppose there's something else inside you have to have a foundation. We're still. I mean, this is not. I mean, this is not exactly a foundation yet, but I hope it will be in the future. But if it is, then we can speculate. But my guess actually is that I don't think it's human beings and everything else. I think it's the Earth. I think it's the monitoring of the Earth actually as an organism. Um, so I may be seeing it a bit different to other people, and monitoring and analyzing everything that's on the Earth. Um, Maybe they see it as a living being, um, which I would agree with, if you want to go to that holistic side of things.
Well, I actually just finished a series of podcasts on superorganisms, and there's a really effective case to be made that human beings as a group are components of a larger organism, right? Now, people who are into spirituality might call that Gaia. Kevin Kelly has redefined that for our technologies as the technium. Byron Reese calls it agora. There are lots of different ways to view this. Another way to view it might simply be that UAP are trying to keep tabs on our biosphere, right? And again, that would be the entire planet and not necessarily human beings. So that would align perfectly with what you're saying, I think.
Mm, yeah. Yeah, I know one can have their thinking discolored with so many different categories going on. But I've come to that conclusion after all these years. I think it's to do with the Earth and not mankind. You know, mankind is part of it, yeah, but it's the whole thing. You know?
Well, is there any importance to the flight paths that could be related to population centers, military facilities, or critical infrastructure? For instance, you had touched on the nuclear correlation a moment ago. That's something that Lou Elizondo and many others have talked about at length. There seems to be this connection between UAP and nuclear materials, right? The entire nuclear supply chain. Um, did your new fork analysis show any of that?
It did actually, yes. And in fact, what's interesting here, um, I mean, the data we were getting to do with the nuclear side seemed to be more of a um, something of interest,
Mm.
seemed to be going off track, you could say. Um, uh, like it's like if if you have a program of surveillance going on. I'm only guessing what could be going on here with these guys. Is that they have set the program up. They've got all these tracks that they operate on over maybe hundreds of years. Um, but if something that's really odd and that's not aligned to do with the Earth, and particularly nuclear, uh, and I think they go off track and then start reconnaissance of these areas. And actually, as you know yourself, they have interjected as well to stop things. So.
Now, I believe you had talked in a past presentation about this idea of motherships, and I think that that is something that Dr. Avi Loeb has talked about as well. That's a very big maybe, right? But the idea being if we have surveillance craft, if they are coming into and then leaving the atmosphere, where are they going? There was this notion that maybe they were docking or rendezvousing with some larger craft. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, in the databases, we have found a lot of cloaking in quite a few of the results, and that would indicate to me that that is you can bring that into the scheme of things. So yeah, I mean, I went on one theory, as you probably know, way back, using some sort of supercraft which ejects, probes, and this is part of the reconnaissance that goes on, and that's why people at a much lower altitude then see, for a few minutes, like one or more probes. That is, we call them probes, because you have to call them something. And then on another track, and this is only a theory, but they're retrieved back into the supercraft. Supercraft, I remember at the time, I thought it may be at around 80 or 90,000 feet up, roughly.
Mm.
Uh, that's a long time back now. I still haven't revised any of this yet because we're still doing the, inclination stuff first. And I think we'd probably work it out actually, where the parking area, you could say, in this, of the supercraft. But I think they're more stealth-like, and that's why, when people say, "Well, where are they? These big motherships?" Well, they are there. I mean, they have been filmed in past cylindrical craft, So there's also the other factor, as you're probably aware, most of your audience, is the interdimensional side that seem to be able to achieve some sort of Alcubierre type of space-time distortion. So yeah, I would go on that one as well. That they're applying those. Um, yeah,
Well, since you mentioned Alcubierre drives, actually, you'd also mentioned cloaking a moment ago. This is something that I've wondered about a lot because people have reported so many different shapes and sizes of UAP. If you're working with the New Fork database, I think they break it down into like 10 different major categories, and there are lots of variability there. But one of the things that I have wondered is if the shape shifting and perhaps some of the different shapes and geometries that are reported could be a side effect of drives that are being used. For instance, in the 2013 Aguadilla sighting, it appeared that the craft split in two and then came back together later. But I noticed that that happened when it was doing a turn, and I'd wondered if that might have been some kind of gravitational lensing. What are your thoughts on some of again, this goes to just visual changes and some of the strangeness that we've seen.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, I gave a presentation in Norway there just in September, which showed some of the cases where we broke down the frame rate, from the usual video rates of 25 frames down to one or two. And you can actually see the gravitational distortion, as it passes straight lines down below, and buildings which would be straight, as well. You can see that distortion there, but you have to look at it very carefully. But there are a number of cases. There are a number of cases, to show and demonstrate that, that you do have a gravitational distortion. The other thing is to do with the Alcubierre time type of craft, is they could be used in some sort of holographic type of screening,
Mm.
because what I find interesting, and there's some cases now that I've come across over the years where you would see an actual, say, the flying saucer, the classic type of flying saucer, moving, and then for its obviously it has a program intention of doing this, but then it starts morphing into a Cessna 152.
Well, I've heard that as
So,
well. In fact, that is something, if I recall correctly, Dr. Eric Davis told me many years ago. He got into the shape shifting. That intrigued him very much. And he was not talking about gravitational lensing, but he did talk about screen projections. The idea that these things sometimes cloak, sometimes appear as normal, like you mentioned a Cessna. It would appear as a normal aircraft, but then it would either disappear or behave very strangely, and someone would look up. Maybe if they saw it momentarily, they would say, "Oh, it's a plane." But if they kept their eye on it, then they would see things that didn't align with normal flight performance, right?
yeah, and also I was presenting stuff on the UFO helicopters, if you like to put it. And when you do the analysis of the UAP helicopter, uh, you can see that the rotational velocity, the rotation speed of the blades doesn't add up from a gravitational point of view in air, like in a conventional sense. It should fall out of the sky. Um, so yeah, they're definitely using, as you say, the screens of some sort, and there could be sort of. Now, I'm speaking in a very mechanical way here, but it's some sort of latching on the holographic screen onto the Alcubierre type of craft, and then changing, whatever was presented in a way that would be acceptable for humans, that everything looks normal, but, but as we accumulate so much the data about the behavior of the craft,
Oh, absolutely. And I know that your work has been very rigorous and very data driven. And so the only reason that I'm kind of going out on this speculative limb, I guess, is one of the things that I found is every scientist has the rigor of what they're willing to fully commit to. And then they also have this much larger pool of ideas that they're asking themselves, right? Just general hypothesis, sometimes not even hypothesis yet. They're just like, why could this be doing this? And I think the things that you're mulling in your head now, which may turn into scientific research in a few years, are really important and it will help the audience to better understand what is going on, you know? So.
yeah, and I think a very important component which has been not is not hasn't been in the equation at all due to, I think, a psychological perception problem, and that's dealing with consciousness. There's a key element there linked to all this, and you can try and escape from all that over the decades, but you can't because you know, when you take out metaphysics, um, then you're only dealing with the astrophysical side of all this in determining things. And really, you're not being fair to what the reality is you're dealing with. So you have to bring in metaphysics into this. I actually presented a whole new thing there in Hesteland in Norway. There was about 60 scientists at this 6-day event, right? And uh, I was actually I was actually the last presenter, you know, and I felt maybe it was the right time to present this material, and I said, look, you've got to bring in the contactees into this. The contactees are so important, and actually could demonstrate why they were that important, and that you know, but particularly a category of contactee, and that would be the conscious contactees, not the unconscious contactees. There's a difference between the two. The conscious contactee are able to deal with who are they're dealing with and the craft as well, physically, that is, where the unconscious, it's very different. In order to get data, the way and this I was presenting is the combinational simultaneous operation of having contactees that are conscious contactees and the detection system.
Let's go into that just a bit. Consciousness is intriguing because it seems like the entire UAP UFO community is going back in that direction. And I guess I have a number of thoughts on it. This is something that I've been mulling over myself. For me, it goes back to Arthur C. Clarke's third law. Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic, right? And it goes to this idea of labels. Maybe some people call it consciousness, maybe other people call it magic, other people say superstition. Whatever it is something that seems to be occurring that we don't understand, but it seems to be reported by contactees, by people who claim to be abductees, by people who are just witnesses to these events, right? We have people who feel like orbs are trying to communicate with them, but they can't put that into words. You know, we have now 2 or 3 new whistleblowers who were talking about using consciousness to communicate with UAP. So I think that there is absolutely a correlation here. And it's interesting for me to see that what started as this UFO renaissance with hard data from the Nimitz encounters has gone back to consciousness. So I think it is aligning exactly with where you're going.
Yeah, I mean, you can show. I mean, there is evidence for this. I don't mean the data for, you know, contactees and their encounters, but I'm talking about the whole telepathic side. I mean, you know, there are a number of papers regarding this, and as you probably know, that all these conscious contactees, it's all telepathic. Well, and of course also the unconscious to some degree, but you can't get cameras into their head. This is the problem. Where the conscious contactees you can, because you've got the craft over there. It was landed or whatever, you know. That's what excites me. That I think we could. I believe this is the future now. Actually, this is the, you could say, second generation UAP research. I think that scientists need to look into. I can understand that there's a psychological perception problem with scientists, and it's not just scientists; it's even people in
Yeah,
general.
all
You know,
of us. Yeah.
yeah, you know, you've got to get over that line, you know, and bite the bullet and go for it, and you know, so that's where I'm going anyway. So,
Well, you know, the zoo hypothesis and the laboratory hypothesis are really interesting. I did an interview a few years ago now, 3 or 4 years ago, with a fellow named Thor who was with the SCU. And one of the things that he said was based on where the human race is in terms of the development of our technology, you know, the advent of AI, things like that, where we have been for the last century to get here and beyond, makes us the most interesting place in the universe. And he said any alien out there would want to be here studying us, not necessarily changing anything, just, again, zoo hypothesis in a lab. What is this young species up to? What will they develop? How are they going to grow and flourish and solve the challenges they have, right? Do you feel like that might be what's going on? Just basic study?
Yes, I do. I have in recent times talked to some of the contactees that are conscious contactees. I'm talking about, not unconscious, and they've all indicated to me. Very few of them. There was only 5 of them I've spoken to, but the general thing is that it's all to do with the Earth, environment, and us, and so forth, and really tuned into our actually our welfare, you could say, and our evolution. And I think the consensus with some of the contactees I've spoken to is, and I'm only summarizing this now because it's so diverse, all this, is that it's if they, as contactees, are bringing in a new level of awareness onto the planet, but no one has been listening to them because of uh, what we should put it, the whole census reality that we have created in the last few hundred years. It's like it's not real, It's we've really boxed ourselves in, and that's why we can't entertain all these things. But I think, as you say, Tim, I think it's all breaking down now, and with the whistleblowers and so forth, and the psionics there recently, of course, just come in.
Yeah. Well, and I think box is the perfect word for it. The word, I mean, I use the word label a lot, but it is. We built this little box and we're saying, okay, this is what we know about reality and it fits in the box, and we're just discarding everything that falls outside of that. But like any good scientific experiment, in addition to the data, you have tons and tons of what's called noise, and that noise represents data from other experiments or parts of the experiment you don't understand. We throw that away because we're looking for one specific thing. Sometimes we come back to that later and say, wait a minute, what we thought was noise actually changes the picture of what we're measuring, right? And it sounds like this idea with, again, building this little box that we say, okay, inside of this we have UAP and outside of this we have consciousness, and we're not going to deal with that. To me, that seems like that's our own limitation. Again, back to Arthur C. Clarke's third law.
Yeah, well, that's the mechanistic side of things. That's the worldview, and it even relates to some of the I've come across over the years the UFO associations. I won't mention any names, but I found it very mechanistic in their approach, and not entertaining that side of it, as you just mentioned there.
Yeah.
Consciousness, I'm talking about.
Well, I mean, again, every major religion engages in some form of prayer or meditation. So in a sense, that's something that we accept and embrace in one social context. And yet, when people talk about UAP, all of a sudden it becomes verboten, right? So I think a lot of that is it's just perceptual, and it will probably change as we come up with better ways to understand what may be happening here. And I, Lord knows I don't know, but it
Yeah,
seems
I
like
mean, I mean, I mean, you have a paradox here. You have a driving force from the non-human intelligence, ETs, and so forth. Trying to trying to sort of do something. And then we have the mankind, but certain populations have this psychological perception problem. Exactly what you've said there. They're not entertaining this other side of things. So anyway, no, there is a positive side to this, by the way, Tim. All right, and that is what what you need to do is to create a bridging mechanism, and that is okay um, to simultaneous work with contactees, conscious contactees, and the detection systems, and then if you take SETI for example, sure everyone's about SETI, is that there are protocols that they go through. I know that I've been in SETI, the UK SETI, for quite a long while, so I know what goes on and the protocols needed and templates. But mainstream will only accept a discovery if it's going through these protocols.
Yeah.
Like the International Aeronautical Federation have the SETI annual meeting every year. And you meet the main guys and so on. Anyway, what I'm trying to get at is that under the International Astronomical Union, there's a template for discoveries in all sorts of areas, from supernovas to GRBs or whatever. But you also have, it's there actually if you discover a life or discover, say, the technosignature. So I think you ought to, so I'm going to say but that's the way I would go, is go that route. But you also need to categorize the, how shall I put it? Because I mean, this is a criticism now, but quite a few scientists are not ready to do something like this. They're already programmed, you could say, for what they do, and then they do it well, of course. So you need to categorize and compartmentalize, rather like black operations, you could say, the different categories, so that you can interrelate all these things, and it may turn out that this would be an official discovery of the extraterrestrial intelligence, or the non-human intelligence that's around the Earth. I think that's the way to go, because then you're bringing it into mainstream then. And then,
Yeah.
you're going through protocols like, the chairman of the the chairman of the SETI Permanent Committee then would go to the United Nations and say, look, we've made the discovery, blah, blah, blah. It has been confirmed by a number of institutions. So I feel that is the way to go. I actually presented this in Heston. I said, I can't think of any other way to do it, because you have a huge dichotomy between all the, I mean, I actually met some, I met some contactees there in Heston. They were at it, they really want to be at it. And of course, the scientists that were there weren't too warm to these type of people. And I had to bring it up. So you have to break the ice in this game, Tim.
Yeah.
So in Heston, because I was the last speaker and presented the importance of the contactees, and then went into the dynamics behind it, how they could work with scientists and so forth. Well, I tell you, that caused quite a stir after, But look, it's like everything in life. You may stretch people, and they may, at the end of the day, after that conscious expansion, you could say, then gradually they might integrate that reality a bit more. So.
Well, I also want to ask if you've been able to reconcile UAP with what appears to be negative results from SETI so far. I mean, SETI is looking for radio signals from lots and lots of different stars. Now, admittedly, they're only able to view a small portion of the sky, right? I mean, there are just some inherent limitations there. It's a really big universe, and they can't look everywhere all at once. But at the same time, despite a few maybes in terms of signals, SETI seems to be coming up dry, whereas UAP seems to be just exploding with information. Have you been able to reconcile the differences there at all?
Oh yeah, very much. Oh, I knew this 20 years ago, dealing with the SETI. I had to be very quiet the way I think, or so, what I say. I was a bit thrown out of a conference. But
Oh, okay.
anyway, yes, yeah. I have been banned in other places, by the way, with SETI in recent years. So, but I hopefully this will all change. Sorry, just trying to answer your question. Yeah, I'd never believed that extraterrestrial civilizations at an advanced level would be using radio and microwave. I was convinced that once they got their now it depends on the Kardashev scale, but we're zero point 0.7 on the Kardashev scale. Anybody that's around say 1.52 max, then would have worked out their planetary affairs, for their planet, and then they were in a position to explore other neighbors, other stellar systems, and they may have actually worked out two key things in this would be they wouldn't be using radio and they wouldn't be using, you know, chemical rockets. So you'd be using pretty advanced propulsion systems, to get to other stars. It could be the Alcubierre type of arrangement. But the communications would be quantum communications. You'd have to use that instant communications. It's no point using radio 50 years to get back to communicate to your home planet. It's ridiculous. Actually, there's certainly in the EU there's actually a project in the EU called Quantel, which is just on the verge of developing, well, it's researching yet and experimenting quantum communications. And I don't mean the quantum communications that we know about in the last few years. I'm talking about instantaneous communications.
Okay.
Because I realized that, with the moon, it's going to be 2 seconds back, the Mars, 10, 15, 20 minutes, depending where it is. So, yeah, so that's, so I know that the EU Horizon program is warming towards this because I was actually invited as one of many partners to develop quantum communication system for outer space. But I could see that this must have been done by ETs out there. So going back to SETI, I think that's where it falls down. I sort of knew it about 25 years ago, so it just doesn't make sense going that route. I mean, it did make sense to me when I was a young guy going all the way along. Yeah, this is the way to go. But then, as with new technologies and thinking a bit more about the whole thing, I think this surprised me that nothing's been found in the last, whatever it is, 60 years or something.
Yeah. So maybe a way to contextualize that would be, I mean, the metaphor for me that comes to mind is, we're like Plains Indians looking for smoke signals on the horizon. And we're like, nope, no smoke signals. Okay, there's nobody else out there. Well, maybe they are. They're just not using smoke signals.
Yeah, that's it. So now that I have, you probably know, I have done some work into quantum superluminal communications. Still working away on this, by the way. We haven't cracked it yet, but we hope to.
Yeah, well, and all of this is intriguing. So many of the things that you've talked about go back to our own limiting worldviews, I guess. And that's not something to hold against humanity. I mean, every culture, every group of people has always had their paradigm, and until that changes, they're trapped in it to some degree. One of the things that I wonder is if some of the upcoming space telescopes may begin to change that paradigm. From what I understand, the Roman telescope will be powerful enough that it'll actually be able to look very carefully at um, basically chemical signatures, right, for biological life on other worlds. And then in the 2040s, they are talking about something called the Habitable Worlds Observatory. I'm sure that you were well familiar with these as an astronomer, where they hope to take what Roman identifies and go in even further. And I would be willing to bet that they will start to find chemical biosignatures all over the galaxy. Do you think that will lead to a
Mhm.
paradigm change?
Yes, I think it's an accumulation of many things, many discoveries in this whole arena. So
Mm.
what you've said is just one aspect of it. It's showing that the whole, well, okay, certain part of our galaxy has detected all this, but I suspect it's a common, well, highly speculative here, but it's common throughout the whole universe, I think. I think there's probably millions and millions of civilizations. Um, but yeah, so I think if you know, I have been following Tim what's been going on, particularly in the US, to do with the so-called disclosure. Uh, the only criticism I have actually is that unfortunately I don't have enough time for following these things, and it did come up actually in Hestelin, and I was saying, well, don't get trapped in all that, that because disclose. How shall I put it? I think disclosure has already happened. It's just that there's a slow integration of the reality taking place. It's phased in, um, like as a transition, and as we, as uh, more stuff becomes disclosed. I don't mean whistleblowers and so forth, and the hearings in the US, but I think on around the planet, I think people are waking up to that. It's not like for 50 years ago is there life out there, and people say, yeah, could well be. Now they're sort of the whole UFO area, I think, is changing things, realizing, oh my God, there's a lot more to this, you know.
You
So
know
we're
what?
living exciting times. So,
Yeah, what you're saying, it reminds me of there was a movie called Roswell in the 1990s, and it was about Jesse Marcel Jr. and the premise was he goes back for a reunion of his old military unit, and all of the issues kind of resurface. And at the end of the movie, he walks into a hangar alone by himself. He's feeling dismayed because people still don't believe his story, right? And he meets who apparently is like some kind of a man in black, right? Played by Martin Sheen. And he asks him, he says, um, why is this a secret? Why is this not accepted? Why is this not out there? And Martin Sheen's character says to him, he said, America is the land of the 30-year mortgage. People need to be able to go to bed at night and wake up the next morning and know that the world is the same one. And I thought, there is a point to that. And even if it's not necessarily a government or the men in black doing it, I think that we do it to ourselves. I think that we need consistency, and it's difficult to, as you said, integrate these ideas into ourselves.
yeah, we all have baggage of all sorts. I don't need to go into all that, but at the end of the day, it's all down to a perception and worldview, and it's not one is trying to, you could change as individuals, and you meet others that are not into this. There's no point persuading them as individuals unless they have the experience. The experience meaning, well, I'm measuring a point here. If they had a full-blown UFO encounter, that would change their life. That's an impact. Um, so, but it doesn't have to be a UFO encounter. It could be a change in frequency around the Earth because we are, as a solar system, we are going through this galaxy, and I'm sure new energies come into position as well. You can see it actually with the young generation, new children coming in like, gosh, they're very awake compared to what I was, way, way, way back. I thought, gosh, this is really interesting, all these phenomena. Um, we're gradually making discoveries as we go along with humans. I mean, you probably heard about the telepathy tapes,
Yeah.
the autistic young people. And even just here in Ireland, I was at an astronomy conference there last weekend, and I was at breakfast, and I mentioned this to a colleague whom I know actually quite well about the telepathy tapes and autism and so forth. And I said, these young people have developed telepathy to a degree where they can actually all meet up in the hill. And he said, what do you mean, the hill? I said, well, it's a virtual place where they all meet up and communicate with each other. I said, that's amazing. I said, so when I look at the contactees project, telepathic internet, it's sort of all making sense. That I think the way to go actually, certainly for SETI, if you like to put it, throw away the radio dishes and everything, and actually go this approach. Deal with the techno-signatures, deal with conscious contactees, and well, develops. You have to have the right resonance as well. That's key, actually, who you're going to deal with as a partner in the for their non-human intelligence. So one of the tools I've used, I've with others actually many years ago, which I presented to Bulgarian and Russian scientists there many years ago, is a partnership with nature intelligence, because really this is key to it. If you want to set up, say, a project dealing in this area, so you have to really define it, a direction to it, a purpose, but all back to an intent. So what I'm talking about is bringing in metaphysics. So it's co-creative now. It's not a situation where the scientist is just, the mechanistic approach, but on the experiential, which is the co-creative approach to it. But you have to have a true partnership with nature intelligence, because nature is intelligent. We're intelligent. We're all part of it. So if you do that, then you can apply those tools at, say, a future event, where you have the conscious contactees, the detection systems, and all this type of thing. I think it'll actually work, because we did actually test out this tool, partnership with nature intelligence, there many years ago, and it worked. I was amazed.
Yeah.
So
Well,
I'm
what
not
you're
talking
just
about CE5, right, which is very popular. The only criticism I have with the CE5 approach is that it's a one-way system, because you don't know actually what you're going to entertain. Where with the partnership with nature intelligence, you're actually setting up a two-way partnership, through this co-creative process. And if you do it that way, then you actually have a balance. So you don't actually have a situation where something's negative, or, well, it could be negative. You're doing CE5. I think there's a negative side to it, to do with the orbs. All right, but if you're doing setting up a partnership in a true sense, as a human with, with nature, that is, and then with what the project is, as I've just explained earlier, and that would actually work.
Yeah. My
Because you're
takeaway.
dealing with balance here. The universe is nothing else but balance, so that's how it would work. If it's an imbalance, it's not going to work. You have other people's baggage in there, which is problematic to this.
Yeah, to me, that reminds me of the observer effect, right? We are part of the system that we are studying, and we may be able to gather some data. We may be able to infer some things from kind of an outside perspective, but we are not outside. We're inside of it, and that's what you seem to be going to with co-creating. Now, Eamonn, I want to thank you so much for your time today. We have run through a ton of topics, and I think that there are some big takeaways for people. One of them is to give thought to this idea of controlled surveillance. Maybe UAP sightings aren't a random phenomena. There's a pattern to it. I think that's one of the big elements that people should keep in mind. I want to close by asking, what is coming up for you as we start to move more into the 2025 year? And what do you see coming up for UAP this year as well?
You mean my work, some of my research I do in the UAP area, or do you mean
Yeah.
what you see in general trending in the world to do with UAP?
Well, actually, both. Both. Do you have any thoughts on either one of those?
Well, I only I only know from my own perspective. That's all. Yeah, I've taken the initiative for the very first time. It was actually thanks to Hestelin, and I'm sure you guys are familiar with Hestelin. Is that I felt that after getting a very good response, from everybody there for this initiative, I actually I've already got an agreement from two conscious contactees. These will be in South America, in order to carry out what I've just explained to you earlier on, the simultaneous, you know. So that really excites me, but also it may not excite others, because you're dealing with conscious consciousness expansion for some people, and they may not be ready for it,
Yeah.
which could be problematic. So I would have to select the right scientists for this, that would have the right resonance to go for something like this.
Wonderful. Eamon, let me thank you again so much for your time today, sir.
It's been great. I've enjoyed it so much, Tim.